evening, viewers, and it's good to be back with you once again. My name is Gillian Burton Persaud, and I'm welcoming you to Talk Back with Gillian, your Sunday evening television program where we take a look at the issues politically in our country today. But as usual, we have lots and lots of things lined up for us to discuss this evening. But as usual, we start with our quote for today. And our quote for today is, one of the best lessons you can learn in life is to master how to remain calm. One of the best lessons you can learn in life is to master how to remain calm. And we really need to be able to master that, at this point in time. So many persons are frustrated, so many persons are fed up, so many persons are, not knowing what is really going on. And so, a lot of fear stepping in, a lot of frustration, and, persons' nerves are on edge. So you need to master how to remain calm. Well, this evening program, we have lots and lots, as I said, of information for you. And I want to go right on to the first issue. Well, September the 18th has come and gone, and the caretaker government that went into caretaker mode after the no confidence motion was passed on December 21st, and since then, not having elections, they went into caretaker mode. But as of September 18th, the caretaker government became illegal, and so they're no longer the government. But what we've been seeing over the past months, and more so over the past week, is that this illegal team has decided to put itself, as we say, not only usurping its position, but also we're seeing forcing itself on the people of the country. Now, I continue to say that the no confidence motion that was passed in Guyana's parliament is not the first to be passed in the world. The first was passed 327 years ago, and it continues up to recently, where you had no confidence motions being passed in the Parliament of Italy and in the United Kingdom and other countries. And all have stood by the rule, by the process, that once a successful no confidence motion is passed on your government, you immediately resign, you put technocrats in place to govern the country, and you go immediately to elections. What we're seeing is history being made in Guyana, where a government refuses to resign, refuses to step down, and is carrying on as if it's business as usual. And more so with showing a hand of force. Because we've noted that September the 18th at midnight, when the caretaker government, the APNU AFC coalition, became illegal, the next day, the People's Progressive Party Civic mounted a peaceful picketing exercise outside of the Pegasus, where Mr. Granger was going to deliver the feature address at the Guyana Manufacturers Association luncheon that day. And it was felt that the fact that he was no longer legally the president of the country, the government became illegal, that, that address should not have been given. And so supporters and members of the PPP, friends, persons of civic minds who were against that particular event that Mr. Granger sought to attend in the capacity of president of the country, went out and mounted a peaceful picketing. What we saw is that immediately police in riot gear was sent out, and we had the incident where the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Karen Cummins, the vehicle was proceeding through the crowds, persons were heckling and chanting, And we also saw where Mr. Patterson, who is supposed to be formerly the infrastructure minister, where he too was heckled by persons there. And they were escorted to other routes. Persons are saying that they know that there were other gates that they were supposed to go to. However, Mr. Granger, in his address, sought to label the protesters as hooligans. There was a further picketing exercise that was held inside the dining hall at the Pegasus, where once again members and supporters, including some MPs of the People's Progressive Party, Civic, went into the luncheon and they displayed their placards and they mounted a protest that was there for a few minutes. They were finally escorted out by police. Mr. Granger, in continuing his address, continued to label those persons as hooligans. Now, it's bad when you're going to look at persons who are exercising their democratic rights. Because in the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, it states that you have the right to assemble and the right to choose. So there's nothing wrong in you carrying out a peaceful picketing. You're not violent. And for Mr. Granger to label those protesters as being hooligans, I wonder if he can cast his mind back to the days of when the PNC came into opposition, when you had the slow fire, more fire picketing exercises and marches, and the reason why they had to stop, and those were led by late President Desmond Hoyt, who was then leader of the opposition after the defeat of the PNC in 1992, and the People's Progressive Party Civic took government. There was a lot of picketing exercises when then President Janet Jagan, when she became president, and we know about those marches where they had the dolly dressed up like Comrade Janet and they were beating the dolly, there were coffins and all those kinds of things, and the loud chanting through the streets. And more so, that Regent Street became a haven for criminal elements who infiltrated the protests. And they wreaked havoc on Regent Street and vendors and around the markets, the Starbrook and the Water Street area. That there was a time that since you heard somebody pass and they say, protesters, everybody lock up, and they're just gone, they disappeared. We're not hearing the coalition referring to those days and branding it as hooligans. The PPP didn't brand it as hooligans. It was a sad affair, and persons were injured, places were looted, tires were burnt in the middle of the street. I could remember being at work and looking out of the windows of then GT&T and seeing in the middle of the street, Hatfield Street, the tires being piled up and rubbish and garbage being burned. And you're wondering how you're going to get home because everything was a mayhem. That was hooliganistic behavior. But peaceful picketing is a right. It's a democratic right of a person or a group to peacefully picket. I have done 1 and 2 and 3 persons picketing peacefully, even when the People's Progressive Party Civic was in government. So I cannot see how the president, Mr. Granger, because, it's illegal, could be so disrespectful to citizens of Guyana. And then we can go on to look at what happened. I have an incident that stays in my memory. And it came to mind forcibly when Mr. Granger was annoyed about the persons who went into that lunch and picketed. Now, it was 2008, I was then president of the Guyana Trades Union Congress, first female, and I was so, happy to know I was going to hold my May Day rally. Invitations, as usual, were sent out to the various political parties and asked both the two main political parties to send representatives to make presentations. I, at the time, was a member of the People's National Congress One Reform, One Guyana platform representing Labour. And so we got a response from the then PNC stating that they were going to field a contingent to participate in the march and the rally. Also, the PPP had indicated that then President Samuel Hines was going to be their representative. I remember the night before the rally, Mr. Samuel Hines called me via telephone to indicate and to apologize that he was not going to be able to be on the march as was customary because he was trying to get a flight change but was unsuccessful. And so the flight that he got will not allow him to be at the rally, but he will get from the airport straight, on the march, he will get from the airport straight to the rally. And that did happen. The PNC did field their large contingent of some persons who are still in the leadership of the PNC. And on the arrival of Mr. Samuel Hines, then Prime Minister, he was booed and heckled very loudly, and the chanting was very loud. And I thought at the time that it was in good standing for me to indicate to those persons who were protesting his presence that he was an invitee, just like they were to the thing. And they went on. I left the podium and I went to those persons and I pleaded with them. The rally had to come to a standstill. And they told me to move out of the way and to let the Prime Minister know that they were not going to stop until he left the rally. That I relayed back to him. And in all goodness of having the rally continued and not for it to come to an abrupt end, Mr. Samuel Hines and his team, including the then Minister of Labour, Mr. Mansour Nadir, they left. And later when I spoke with them, they all said, nothing wrong with that. It's just a part of a person's democratic right. They weren't violent, and once you're not violent, it's a part of your rights. Today, the shoe is on the other foot, and we're seeing this big hue and cry about who are hooligans, and we had a vigil last, I think it was Thursday, Wednesday, Monday, sometime along last week, definitely can't remember exactly the date, but it was outside the convention center when the People's Republic of China, the ambassador held the reception for the 70th anniversary, I think it was, of China. And once again, Mr. Granger was supposed to be the chief guest there. And a vigil in the way of a picketing exercise in the way of a vigil was held. And there was a lot of riot police there, once again, blocking the protesters. Persons couldn't get into the venue, It was difficult for some persons after a time to get in. And then I remember the incident when, with the Red House, the Chedi Jagan Research Center, when that lease was brought to an abrupt end, and we held a vigil there, a candlelight vigil, against it, how it was the court proceedings went, and the decision that was handed down, that was later reversed. And at that vigil, we saw Minister then, Valda Lawrence, turned up with a crew. A crew was there before her. She turned up, joined the crew, and a PPP comrade, Mr. Jason Abdullah, bottle, I think it was pelted at him, and he was slapped by one of the persons who was there. Nobody did anything. The police didn't do anything, even though there were a few around. And even though we condemned the act, nothing was done about it. But it seems that one set of persons can do what they want, but others have to abide by the law. And that brings me to another show of force, where yesterday we had the St. Cuthbert's Mission Heritage Day, and as usual, they will invite both government and opposition, and even though we know the government is illegal, they were invited. Mr. Granger went there. We're told that there were lots and scores of police in riot gear once again. Mr. Irfan Ali, who is the presidential candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic, was not prohibited to speak on the program, even though he was slated to speak on that program. And as they walked around, the PPP comrades who were there were lots of police all around the place. I think they said some following them. So why do we need all of this? Why this excessive show of force? Why try to frighten persons into submission when you, who were supposed to be in charge of the affairs of this country, allowed yourself as a government to go into a state of illegality? Why? Is it a game that you want to show that you're big and bad? Well, Guyana is going to go down in history for not nice, not following its constitution. The government, who is supposed to be the custodians of the constitution, the enforcers of the constitution, have large and wide violated that very constitution. They have disrespected the rule of law. They have gone against law and order in every way. But they want the citizens, the ordinary citizens of this country, to follow the Constitution, to adhere to the Constitution, to adhere to the rule of law, to abide by law and order, while they do otherwise. And we ask the question, could that be fair? Could that be right? No, it's not fair, and no, it's not right. Sometimes I wonder if Mr. Granger, because he's a historian and, wrote a few books, small books here and there, if it is that he's trying to etch his name into the annals of history worldwide as being the first president leading a government that went against a no-confidence motion that was successfully passed 327 successive years. I can't see it as any other way. You know what is right. This country is supposed to be run by the Constitution, the handbook of the laws of Guyana, and you who are in charge of it has violated it to a very large extent. You've thrown it through the window. I think maybe we should gather all those books and just burn them, because the Constitution is not adhered to by the persons who are supposed to be the enforcers of it. So much so that they have worked outside of the Constitution. They've gone against the Constitution to the extent that they're now illegal and they do not want to accept it. You hear the former Mr. Granger going about the place, making announcements. They're going about as if it's business as usual. They're still doing outreaches and doing projects. And we saw last week where the UK had to, make a statement. Because these fabrications, these misrepresentations that are going on by an illegal government is putting not only local persons, regional persons, but international persons in a bad place. And so we don't know when that is going to come to an end. We know that Mr. Granger announced late last week, that he's looking at March the 2nd for elections. And after that, there were a lot of reasons given, matrimony and all of that, and no, you take it to March the 2nd. GECOM, the chairman, had given a date of they would be ready by February the 20th, 2020. And we're asking a question. Now, GECOM is an agency that is supposed to always be prepared and ready at any moment for elections. They're being paid a salary. It's not temp staff, it's permanent staff. And the holy run around that we're having of all the unpreparedness where GECOM is concerned, it's appalling and shocking. And I think the management and all the persons who are in charge of making sure that that agency functions at a high level of efficiency needs to be sent home. It's unacceptable. It's not that GECOM was set up just for a 5-year program. GECOM was set up with the knowledge of us knowing and understanding that at any time when there is a crisis and an election, whether it's general and regional or local government elections has to take place, then they have to be in preparedness. They have to be in go mode. What we're seeing is that it is apparently persons were laid back, not doing anything, and so now we're getting all the excuses. We also have to wonder how much political influence is taking place in GECOM, an agency that is supposed to be independent and professional. But the leader of the opposition did state from the commencement that the opposition members of parliament will not return to parliament to extend the life of the government, to give legality to anything that they're doing since they were defeated. And that continues to be, that the opposition will not return to parliament. So we're looking on, and let's look on to see what's happening, what's taken place. You know, as they go forward, every day you're getting something new coming out from persons who took up the challenge and took up the responsibility to lead a country. We're seeing all these, you know, bad moves, all these not uncertainties of what they're doing, not certain of what they're about, and a lot of bullyism and a lot of aggression and arrogance taking place. And you know, sometimes they say, what comes out of a man's mouth defileth them. Well, we're going to go to a clip of a video quite shortly where Dr. Karen Cummins went to the UN. You know, she was the Minister of Foreign Affairs when the government was legal. Now it's illegal. And in her presentation, she labeled what the People's Progressive Party Civic usually say of Mr. Granger, that he's danger. And so in that presentation, she alluded to Mr. Granger as Mr. Danger. So we'll go to that clip now.
Thus, a future of considerable promise for all the peoples of Guyana beckons, and it is they who will determine the course and outcome and legacy that we will bequeath to succeeding generations. To this end, President Granger has declared a decade of development for all Guyanese.
Well, you heard that yourself. Dr. Karen Cummins referring to Mr. Granger as Mr. Danger. And as I said, they say, what comes out of a man's mouth defileth him. And then, as we go on here on Talk Back with Gillian, we're looking at the international agency's position on Guyana's situation. Well, we know the very first press statement that came out came from the ABE countries, the American, the British, and the European Union, after the announcement was made that by the chairperson of GECOM that the GECOM they're looking at a date of February 2020 for the hosting of elections. And immediately after then, a statement was sent out where those major international countries expressed their disappointment of GECOM not staying within the time frame, that Mr. Granger has not pursued to have a early date set for elections that is within the time frame, reminding them about the High Court and the CCJ's final decision. And the fact that if Mr. Granger does not see it fit to have recall elections early within the mandated time frame that was given, then, you know, they could have economic sanctions, so to speak, on Guyana. They will not be able to continue. They will find it difficult to continue supporting Guyana in aids, by way of aid towards its development. And that is sad when we have to reach to that point where international agencies, you know, have to make their pronouncement. And we saw how disturbed Mr. Granger and his team was when that announcement was made. You know, all the time since they came into office, you were hearing that, oh, nobody can move us as the internationals put us there. But now that the internationals have to go by rules, by the policies that are set out globally, and they had to make a pronouncement as it relates to a democratic process taking place and not having democracy denied, they were annoyed, and they're saying that they don't have a right in our business. You know, these internationals allow us to deal with our situations and resolve our issues and all of that. But they weren't saying that when it got into office. So, you know, it continues to be a case with this coalition that once it is not in their favor, they have a problem. But they want to say that the People's Progressive Party Civic are the persons that behave that way. When it's glaring in front of us, that's the way they see it. You know, they don't want to be reprimanded. They don't want to be pulled over. They want to, you know, do things the way they want to do it. And we continue to say, sad we're not hearing from CARICOM up until now. CARICOM has gone. You know, CARICOM and CARIGone, we're not hearing from them. They seem to be quite, you know, okay. And what is disturbing is that CARICOM has its secretariat, its headquarters, right here in Guyana. So they're fully aware. The Secretary General of CARICOM goes to office not far from the convention center, right at Lillian Dahl, right under the railway embankment. We're not hearing anything. We haven't heard anything coming out of CARICOM, even though the issue went to the Caribbean Court of Justice. So maybe CARICOM has disappeared. They've gone under. They're very, very silent on the matter. And then later on, we also heard, again, this, you know, flip-flopping and filibustering when a lawyer, an attorney at law, decided to think, I think is Mr. Datterdin, who decided to take the oil and gas companies to court because of the low payment of salaries to persons working on the vessels. And lo and behold, Mr. Jordan from the Ministry of Finance stated that the coalition was unaware of those low salaries being paid. So how are you running this country? There's a lot of shouting out and the jumping up about the oil and gas sector and how good it's being monitored and all the monitoring mechanisms, and you know, everything is going to be good for us. Oil will start pumping in 2020, and you're not aware of the wages and salaries being paid to personnel who work on those vessels. It's unacceptable. Totally unacceptable that is what we're going to hear coming from the person who was placed in charge of the Ministry of Finance. And as we continue, the vigils and the roadblocks that are taking place, you know, when you have the vigils, the roadblocks that are being put up and persons can't enter the vigil venues, you know, and it's very frustrating because they want to exercise their democratic right and they're being prevented from doing so. But it has gone further that many streets that surround the Ministry of the Presidency, the Office of the President as we will normally call it, they are being blocked off from vehicular traffic. And it's causing a buildup and a congestion, time wasting, causing persons to get to work and to their businesses and to their appointments late. Because you come down accustomed to traveling a particular route and you suddenly have to be aware that you have to divert. That area is blocked off. It's unfair to the citizens of this country. Why we have to block off all those streets for what? And all the outriders, you're an illegal government, you're an illegal team. And it seems that the more illegal you are as the days go by, the more excessive spending is taking place on unnecessary things. It's so unbelievable. So for the whole of last week, persons were complaining that the areas immediately surrounding the office of the president, you know, it was blocked off from vehicular traffic. And then we come to claims and objection period, which we're going to start on the 1st of October, claims and objection, the period where you can do your name changes, your change of address, and those kinds of things. But we're also hearing of an extension of time that has been gazetted outside of the time that was agreed upon, and also we're hearing about persons having to go in to present themselves into the GECOM offices so that their information can be clarified. Never heard of before. And so we'll go to the clip where the People's Progressive Party Civic Commissioners, GECOM commissioners, held a press conference on Friday on the same issue.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for attending this press briefing at very short notice. The urgency of this engagement is occasioned by a series of events that have occurred overnight and as late as this morning. That is to say, overnight we observed in the official gazette a publication from the Guyana Elections Commission in relation to the claims and objections period that is slated to commence on the 1st of October 2019, with a view of holding regional general elections at the stipulated time. Now, let me deal with that publication in the official gazette first. A perusal of the schedule, the second schedule of that order, which is dated the 26th of September 2019 and is issued under the hand of Justice Claudette Singh, Chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. In the second schedule at 3, it details the entirety of the claims and objections period to be from the 1st of October 2019 to the 18th of November 2019. A quick calculation of that period and the number of days that comprise the same will show that it contains a period of 49 days. It was widely reported in the press coming out of the statutory meeting of the Guyana Elections Commission on Tuesday of this week that it was agreed by the Commission that the period to be allocated for claims and objections would be 35 days, and that period would commence from the 1st of October 2019. Now, I don't proclaim to be the best mathematician, but it does not require any superior mathematical skills to see that 35 days from the 1st of October would lead you to the 4th of October, with both days being inclusive. So from the outset, it is everyone's guess as to where this 49-day period ending on the 18th of November 2019 came from. But my observation, or our observation of this publication, we did not remain silent on it. This morning, at the first opportunity, myself and my fellow Commissioner Robeson Ben, who's with me today, engaged the Chairman, Honorable Justice Retired Madam Claudette Singh, on this issue, because this order is issued under her hand. She undertook to us to investigate the circumstances which led to this publication, this erroneous publication, appearing in the official Gazette of Guyana. And as I am speaking that this is a publication in the official Gazette of Guyana, let me start by expressing my consternation that the official Gazette is considered to be notice to the world. It is a publication that in law is taken to be notice to the world. And if the Guyana Elections Commission, which is responsible for this publication, will publish something so erroneous that will obviously engage the attention of all Guyanese and ostensibly the world, then why do we have to be faced with this? It only leaves us to imagine what happens with issues that may never see the light of day. But this publication in the official Gazette is not the only surprising thing that we have seen today. During the course of this morning, we were met with a press release under the hand of the Public Relations Officer, Ms. Yolanda Ward, which was purportedly issued today, which says GECOM's claims and objections exercise will commence on the 1st of October 2019. This very press release repeats the erroneous dates that are included in the Gazette, but it goes further. It seeks to specify, in fact, in bold, during this exercise, every person whose name appear, and that I'm reading it as it is, grammatical errors are not mine. During this exercise, every person whose name appear on the preliminary list of electors, PLE, must visit the registration office in their respective area with their national identification card to verify their registration record in order to be included in the official list of electors. I want to label this hogwash before I go on anymore. This was never a decision taken by the Commission, either in whole or in part. In fact, it was not even a discussion that was had at the Commission level. This can only be seen as an attempt to foist another version of house-to-house registration on the citizens of this country. But importantly, how did we arrive at this stage at where we are? You would remember, ladies and gentlemen, that there was a case that was heard by the Honorable Chief Justice, Madam Justice Roxanne George, which dealt with the legality or otherwise of the conduct of the house-to-house registration process. The outcome of that case caused the cessation of the house-to-house registration exercise by way of an order from the chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. In that seminal judgment of Her Honor, of the Honorable Chief Justice, she stated specifically and very clearly that residency was not a requirement to be included on the official list of electors, and by extension, the preliminary list of electors. This, and the reason for her coming to that conclusion in our very erstwhile judgment was that the Constitution did not impose such a requirement on the citizens of Guyana. So for this to be included in this press release from the Public Relations Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission is, I would want to label it, and I'm being very charitable when I say this, mischievous at best, but it is not surprising. Members of the media, you will recall that for 2 successive weeks, I have had cause to challenge statements made by the Public Relations Officer, and this seems to now be a trend in what is coming out or what is emanating from that section of GECOM. You'd recall last week I had to deal with the issue of the submission of documents, etc., to the Guyana Elections Commission. The week before that, I had to deal with another issue in relation to timelines and statutory dates. So this sort of misinformation coming from the Secretariat at the Guyana Elections Commission, for me, seems to be a proliferation of the mischievous acts that they have become known for. Now, it was decided in the commission after very intense deliberation that the period for claims and objections would be 35 days. This was publicly stated and agreed upon by all members of the commission in the press. It was widely carried and it was not disputed by any party. So, why we would have to deal with this at this juncture, like I said, is very questionable. It is not the first time that we have had reason here in the commission and at other places to question the work of the Secretariat. It is clear as well that this order is generated by the Secretariat. It begs the question whether a deliberate attempt is being made by the Secretariat to mislead and or undermine the work of the newly installed chairman. It's a question. The evidence is there for us to determine and whether that is so. That being said, it highlights the need for external scrutiny and oversight in the work of the Commission to ensure that all the processes leading up to, during, and post-election are done in keeping with the highest levels of transparency and in keeping with the tenets of the law. Because as you know, elections are a statutory function, and their timelines, their activities, etc., are all grounded in law. I believe that my colleague has some opening remarks as well, and thereafter we'll entertain questions. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the media. In keeping with our timelines and understanding, initially with respect to the holding of elections by the end of this year, 2019, there was a discussion all along in trying to deal with work plans which were submitted by the Secretariat, which were going into March and April of 2020, and which we clearly objected to. And the new chairperson, Madam Chair, Madam Claudette Singh, did say to us that we were working towards elections towards the end of 2019. We did arrive somehow at a position, and we were very unhappy with it on our side, where we were told that it would be next year in February. But the discussions always related initially to 21 and 28 days in respect of claims and objections. There were far-flung number of days, in our view, which were mentioned. And the furthest one that I can recall was this exact number of days, 49 days. And it was mentioned by Commissioner Corbin of the other side.
Well, there you had it. 2 of our 3 GECOM commissioners from the opposition there, Mr. Seisganraj and Mr. Robson Ben, speaking to you there and giving you some insight of what is taking place currently in relation to our elections process. And that it was found by careful scrutiny of last week's official gazette that the days of 35 days that was agreed upon at the GECOM meeting with the other commissioners, the 3 other commissioners from the government side, the coalition side, what has happened is that they switched the days, and instead of 35, you had an extension which took it to 49 days. And it seems that in discussion that they had with the GECOM chairperson, retired Justice Madam Claudette Singh, she seems to be unaware from where that came from and would have had to investigate on that. Now, that tells us of that is falsifications of information, critical information in a very important document as the official gazette. And somebody needs to be, persons need to be pulled over about that. How you can't go about doing that? The official gazette is a very important piece of document for anything in Guyana. Unless it's gazetted, it cannot be legal. And when you're going to put something in a document that seeks to legalize things and you're going to put the wrong information, falsification, that's fraud. And also the fact that the commissioners were talking about the visit that I spoke about earlier. You're asked to present yourself to the GECOM office so that your information could be. It never happened before. And as the commissioner said, it seemingly wants to be something where you move people from off the list because of residency, and that was in the High Court. Justice Roxanne George Wiltshire said, you can't do that. You can't take people's name off of the National Register of Registrants because their address is different. I can choose where I want to have my address be. That's my right. It doesn't mean that because you might not meet me at home in Monrepo that I don't live there. I might have gone for some time to help out a relative, or because of work, I am now in Essequibo. So why do you want to move me from there? My official address is what I have is there. I have the right to choose where comfortable it is for me to be in a constituency to vote. And, a lot of dishonesty and deceitfulness and disorder taking place at this time that is very, very appalling, and something that should not happen in our country today, something that we need to, look at. And again, as I keep asking persons, let us not look at race and the color of your skin. Let us look at the issues and deal with it, because the issues are what is important to us. And as I said earlier also, even though the coalition know that they're illegal as a government, they're still going out and all these fan-out exercises and going all about the place, making a lot of promises of things that they're going to do and signing off on contracts and all of that. But 4 years and they did nothing for the people of this country. And I'm going to read to you a statement from the General Secretary of the PPP as it regards to the flooding in Region 3. And it says, our party leaders and activists have visited several areas across the country which have been affected by flooding brought about by the unusual spring tides. We have seen firsthand the suffering of citizens whose homes are flooded, who are also discomforted and have had their livelihoods disrupted. Many have suffered untold damage to personal and other items and may never recover from the devastation brought about by this unfortunate situation. We therefore call on the Civil Defense Commission to take immediate measures to bring relief to those that are suffering. In addition, the party wishes to make public its full support for those agencies of the state that are entrusted with the responsibility of bringing necessary relief at this time. We also wish to express our extreme empathy with those that have been affected. And that there is a statement from the General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party Civic as it relates to the flooding that is taking place across, especially in Region 3, because of the spring tides. And as I said, coalition, 4 years in government, did nothing, and now that they're illegal, they're running all around the place, visiting here and visiting there and making a lot of promises and, signing off on contracts and still on a back foot as to what is really happening in the country. A very disappointing government, a very disappointing tenure for a government that took on the responsibility to develop our country, to make it better, to take us to that next level. The promise of the good life that is yet to come has not been realized by many Guyanese, and the suffering is widespread. People are frustrated, people are disgusted, they're fed up, they're sad, they're disappointed. We never thought that after 23 years of the People's Progressive Party Civic in government, taking Guyana to that other level with rapid development, rapid economic growth, persons were able to establish their own businesses, take care of their families in the ways that they should, that in such a short period of time, it's like a whirlwind hurricane. Everything that has been built and developed has now gone down the drain. It's going down very rapidly. And so as we continue to watch the developments as it relates to the illegality of the government that was the government, and Mr. Granger and his team, who seems to embed themselves within the leadership of the country and seemingly want to drive fear into persons that, if you come out and you support any protest or you decide to protest, we'll meet you with brute force and ignorance. Well, Guyanese are no longer who they used to be. And I think they were galvanized by the fact that in former years, the supporters and the members of the PPP were a very quiet and passive group of persons, They were never the persons that really got angry. Today, because of frustration and all of that, they have raised their voices. They have decided that they're going to stand up in defiance for all that the PNC and Mr. Granger and his team seems to want to take them down that road. They will not have it. And so in that light vein, they are now labeled as hooligans. They're not hooligans. They're standing up for their rights. They're standing up for justice. They're standing up for what they believe in, and they're standing up for what they should have. Guyana belongs to all of us, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, political persuasion, whatever. And we all need to share in its prosperity, not just one group of persons, as we're seeing quite lately. And so I leave you with this excerpt from Dr. Chedi Jagan, and it's from an excerpt in June the 12th, 1963, and it says, if democracy and parliamentary systems of government are to be preserved in this country, and if there is to be future peace and progress in this country, then there must be a determined stand to maintain law and order and the rule of law. Very timely for now. And is with this excerpt, I say good night to you, my viewers. Thanks for having me in your homes. I'm going to give you a heads up. I will not be here on next week. You know, next week is the big semifinals in Guyana for the CPL, and I know lots of persons will be going to that match and will want to be watching it on television. So I'll give you your space to do that, but I'll be back the next week, October 13th, for another program of Talk Back with Gillian. Until then, do have a wonderful evening and a successful week ahead of you.